Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of One Man Stream. In this episode I'm going to show you how to build this graphic right here in GT Title Designer. I'll show you how we do that step by step, and then I'm going to show you a couple different ways of bringing data into this graphic. We'll be bringing it in like we've done it so many other times using the List Widget. We'll be bringing it in from a vMix data source from an Excel spreadsheet. We'll show you this and so much more on today's episode of One Man Stream. So to start off with, we're going to go to GT Title Designer, and I'm going to turn off several of these layers just to make it a little bit easier for us. And this is very straightforward. The way that we're doing this is the way that we've done it so many times before. To get these rectangles here, I'm just going to go up here and click the rectangle button. I'm going to make a rectangle, and then I'm going to go to Format. I'm going to put 21 in each one of these two fields right here. And what that does, if you look down here where I'm pointing, you can see that it rounds off the corners. The next thing that I'm going to do is under Effects. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skew it. And then I'm going to go Home, and I'm going to go right here, and this is the outline, and I'm going to change the outline to black, and I'm going to change the thickness to 4, and then I'm going to change the inside fill color to black. And that's how we got this rectangle right here. So how did we get this little yellow rectangle? Well, we did the exact same thing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here under Format, and I'm just going to see what the height is, because I want to make the height the same, or roughly the same, just a smidge shorter, and the height is 131. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Rectangle again. I'm going to bring this box in. I'm going to do the same thing that we did last time. Going to go ahead and ease the radius, or we're going to make the radius 21. And you can see the little red triangle, or the little red rectangle there, that it's eased those corners over. So then we're going to go to Effects, and we're going to skew it. And then let's go to Format. Okay, the format of the rectangle, the height is 131, and of the smaller rectangle that we just made, it's 114. So let's go ahead and make this one 130. And then what I'm going to do is click on where it says Rectangle 2, and then use the arrow keys on the keyboard to position it where I want it. And that's good right there, but I'm going to have to make it just a little bit smaller. In the final view, we want to make sure that we do have this edge that we can see all around it. So let's go ahead and make that rectangle just a little bit smaller. We'll make it about 124. We'll use our keys again. And that looks pretty good. So that's how we made this little rectangle right here. In order to get this text in, you go over here and you click on the ABC. And then you just make yourself a text box. And then I always center my text box in the middle up and down, and in the middle right to left. And the font that seems to work best for my particular purpose is the Impact font. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to type in the same thing that was in the other one, 90 minutes. And then I'm going to go back up here to the font size, and I'm going to make it 48. So that's how we did that. Now, how did we get the substitute? And if you look close on the substitute, you can also see a little outline. Well, that's not an effect that you can get directly with GT Title Designer, so I'll show you how I did that. I came over here to ABC, and I'm just going to do this in a little bit different color, just so that it stands out a little bit better. So we're going to make the text fill color in this situation white, and we're going to center it in the middle and up and down left. We're going to center it up and down and left to right. Then we're going to change that text once again to the Impact font, and we're going to make it 60. And I'm just going to go ahead and type substitute. Okay, so how did I get this little outline shadow? I used I right-clicked on my mouse and hit copy, and then I hit paste. And then over here on the side, you'll see where it says text block 3. I made sure that this was below the other text, And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this one just a slightly different color. So I'm going to come over to the fill color, and let's go ahead and make it a gray. And then what I'm going to do is I clicked on the text box 3 right here, and then I'm going to use these keys to position it a little off center from where the other one is, so they're not directly overlapping. And you can see that it starts to appear there. And then you can see we have that outline, and it kind of gives that the shadow effect. So that's how I did that. So that's the pretty much the first layer, except for this logo right here. And how I did that is I cheated a little bit. What I did is I came over and I clicked on this rectangle box here, and I right-clicked and copied. Then I came over here and I right-clicked and pasted. Then I brought it over here. And this is what we're going to use to mask this logo with, so that we're not seeing the entire logo. So let's go ahead and bring in a logo. And I clicked on this one right here and clicked open. And we're going to shrink it down. And we're going to put it over top of where we had the rectangle 3. So this is where a little trickery comes in. I go up to effects, and under mask I'm going to click rectangle 3. And so now the only part of that image that's going to show is the portion that is over top, or the portion within rectangle 3. It just brings in that portion of the image that's overlapped by that rectangle. And that's how we did the first part of it. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to bring in layer 2, which is player in. And we did that the exact same way with just a couple slight different modifications. We did the same thing. We brought in the rectangle, we skewed it, and then we rounded the edges over. And then what I did is I went up here and I just used this yellow one that we had used previously. I copied and pasted and changed the fill color to green. And then I brought in, I went over to the ABCs again where it says text block, and I brought in this one, which is in player name, and I brought in this one, which is in player number. Now, one thing that I did differently that I didn't do with substitute is because this substitute is going to be static text, so I don't have to worry about very long names. I went up here and I clicked on shrink, and on player name, on in player name, and in player number. That way, if I have a very long name, it's going to stay within this box that we created and not spread out over the other elements. So that's the only thing that I did different when I created this part right here. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to click on layer 3, and this is out player. And I pretty much did the same thing. All I did was I went to layer 2, I copied and pasted, and then all I did is I moved those elements around. So I just changed the fill color on this particular rectangle. I changed the fill color from green to red. You can see that right there. So all I did was move these elements around and placed them in their new positions and change the in to out. Now, generally what I do is I create the graphic first, and then I will go back and I will put animation into it. And so here's what the animation looks like. And the animation is kind of simple and straightforward. I do my animation in layers instead of individual elements within the layers. I animate the complete layer. So after I made this first rectangle right up here at the top, I went through and I highlighted each one of the elements. I held down on the control key and I highlighted each one of the elements, and then I went up here and I created and then I clicked the create group button. And I did that for each one of them, and that way I am able to animate the group instead of having to go and animate each one of the individual elements. So just one more time. That's what the animation looks like. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go take a look at our vMix UTC layout. And what I did here is I've used the NDI monitor to bring in the output from the main vMix production so I can see what's going on there. I created this a button right here. You just go up to widget, click on button. You can see that it is a button widget. I just went in to where it says name and I typed in substitute, and then I went and clicked on plus next to script, and it brought this in right here. The commands are listed in category, so I went to the overlay commands and I use overlay input X, and then from the drop down menu it's going to bring in all the inputs that you have in your vMix production, and the one that we're working with today is the one that says Soccer Substitution, and I clicked on that and I clicked on OK. I put it on overlay 3. And the thing about using input X is when you use overlay input X, it works like a toggle. So the first time you press on it, it brings the overlay in, and then you press on it again and it takes the overlay out. So we're going to bring the data in by two different methods. One is going to be utilizing the list widget, and that's what this in player and out player is right here. I'm going to click on this. You can see that it is a list widget, and all I did is I brought in the soccer sub input twice, and we're going to map it to two different fields. We're going to map it to one that says in player number and then in player name, and we're going to use our bar delimited data. One thing you have to make sure when you're using bar delimited data and you're using this method is make sure under table you have this tick box checked. If you don't, the information will not display correctly. So I just went over here at this plus button and I clicked where it says add list item. I clicked it 5 times and I brought in these, or I added these 5 pieces of data. So I just have a number separated by a bar and then a name. I did that for 5 different pieces of information, and that's how I did the in player. For out player, we did the exact same thing. We brought in the input twice, but this time we have it mapped to out player number and out player name. On the previous one, it was in player number and in player name. So let's go ahead and bring the graphic back in. So now when we use information from this drop down menu, it's going to change. So this brings in number 10, Amber Nicole. Click on this one, 22, John Smith, and the same thing for out player. Drop down menu, click on this, it changes to number 11, Sally Clutch. Click on this, it changes to number 18, Kyle Strong. So it's very simple and very quick to change this information on the fly if you have more than one player coming in and out at a time. That's how we did it using the list widget. Now there's a couple other pieces of information here. The team logo, which is what appears right here. I brought this in as a list widget. And what I did is I just went to my logos and I just chose several different logos. I'm going to click on this one here for North Odom. I'm going to click on copy path. Then I'm going to come over here and hit the plus button. It adds a new line at the bottom. I'm just going to right click and paste, and it brings it in. The thing that you also notice is it brings in the quotation. It brings in quotation marks along with that file path. You have to go back in and you have to take out these quotations, because if you don't, the image will not display properly. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, go to the drop down menu. You can see we have the North Odom one added to our list. I'm going to click on that and you can see where it changes over here on the graphic. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is using a data source to bring in your information. And this is the spreadsheet that I created. It's very simple. It has 2 different pages within the spreadsheet. It has one that says player in, and then it has a second one that says player out. It's the same information on both sheets, but we have to have some way to designate player in and player out when we're doing the mapping on the graphic. First of all, let's go ahead and bring it in as a data source. So all I did is I went down here to the hamburger menu, I clicked on it, I went to data source, I clicked on data source, and then this opened up right here. You can see the information. It's the exact same information that we had in our spreadsheet, and you can see that we have two different tables within the sheet. We have player in and we have player out. Okay, now when you bring in the data source, you click on the plus button right here, and you have several different forms of data sources that you can bring in. This one, in this particular case, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it automatically populates Excel \CSV. And then you just click on browse and you take it to where the spreadsheet is that you want to incorporate as a data source. And mine is right here. I click on open. I click OK. Oh, one other thing I want to point out is the header. I had a header on each one of those columns. One says number and one says name, and I want to check this box right here because when that information comes in, I want to use those two headings. If not, it's just going to say column 1 and column 2, and then you're going to have to remember what column 1 and column 2 contain. So if you click on this button right here, it says use first row as column name, and you can see right here it has number and it has name. But we don't need to bring it in twice, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one out. So the next thing we have to do is we have to map the particular graphic. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I bring in the substitution graphic that we designed earlier in GT Title Designer. I'm going to right click on it and click on Text Editor. And then the pieces of information that we need to map is out player number, out player name, in player number, and in player name. So let's go to out player number. Then we click on data source. You can see we brought in Excel separated value, and then we are using our two tables. We are using the out player table since we're working on the out player portion of this graphic, and then we're doing out player number, so we want to make sure from the drop down box we only have two pieces of information. We want to make sure that we have number selected, and then we click OK. Same thing for out player name. We're going to go to data source. It's already populated, Excel separated value. Player out is the table we're using, and then the column we're using this time, since we're dealing with player name, we want to make sure that name is selected, and we click OK. Now the other two pieces of information are in player number and in player name. So let's go to in player number, click on data source. The same thing, Excel \CSV, player in this time because we're working on the in player, and the column is number because we're working on in player number. And the last piece of information that we have to map through data sources is the in player name. Same data source, Excel CSV, and this is case sensitive and it has to be just like this, Excel \no space CSV. And then we want to make sure, since we're working on in player name, that the column that we're using is the name column. And that's how you do the mapping. Now the last thing that I have to show you is right here using the data source. So let's go ahead and bring in the graphic again. So we're just going to click on this. We're going to bring in the graphic. And by using these buttons, we'll be able to change the player in and the player out. So let's change the player in. I click it one time. You can see it changes to Amber Nicole. I'll click it one more time. It changes to John Smith. Now for player out, same thing. Well, before we go to player out, this is player in next, and this is player out. Oh, silly me. And this is player in previous. Well, let's look at how we did it on these two buttons. The command that we're going to use is data source next row, and that's going to take us down in the list. And again, it has to be just like this. Excel \CSV, comma, no space, and then player in because we are using the player in tab. And then player in previous, this one is going to be data source previous row. This one here was data source next row. So next row is going to take us down in the list, and previous row is going to take us up in the list. And since these two buttons are dealing with player in, we got to make sure the table that we're using says player in. So we're going to go to this last piece of information right here. Again, player out, and we're going forward, so it's going down in the list, so it's going to be data source next row. And since we're dealing with player out, we have to make sure the table that we're using is also player out. And then on the player out previous, our command is going to be data source previous row, and then we got to make sure that we're dealing with player out, since this is the player out button that we're dealing with. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to click on player out now and display that in the spreadsheet. So now when I click the player out button, this is going to take us down in the list, and you can see it does, and you can also see the names are changing. And then when we go player out previous, this is going to take us up in the list, and you can also see once again that the names are changing. That's our episode for today. I hope you're finding this tutorial series helpful. If you are, please give us a thumbs up and a like. Make sure you do subscribe so that you'll be alerted as soon as new videos are posted. And as always, thank you so much.